Coming up on The World Today, former French Prime Minister François Fillon and his Welsh wife are found guilty in a fake job scandal. "25 people die in a boat capsize in Bangladesh." Plus, global death toll from coronavirus passes 500,000. A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. Thanks for joining us on The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. We begin in France, where former Prime Minister François Fillon has been sentenced to 5 years in jail, 3 of them suspended for embezzling public funds in a scandal that wrecked his 2017 run for president. Fillon's wife, Penelope, was also found guilty for her role in the scam that saw her receive about €1 million for minimal work as her husband's parliamentary assistant. She got a 3-year suspended sentence. The chief judge of the Paris court said the 66-year-old Fillon had eroded public trust in political class as a result of paying his wife a salary that was disproportionate to the work done. Fillon and his wife have decided to appeal the verdict, meaning that he will avoid going to jail before the appeal is heard. 25 people have lost their lives, with many more still missing following a ferry capsize in Bangladesh near Dhaka, the capital. Authorities described the incident, saying the ship, named the Morning Bird, overturned after collision with another vessel in the Buraganga River, close to the country's largest river port, the Sedagat. Local media say the ferry came from a village in the center of the country and was carrying about 50 passengers. Witnesses also say that many of the passengers were stuck in cabins on the ferry following the collision. Some passengers fortunately swam ashore, but some are still missing. Hundreds of people die each year in ferry accidents in Bangladesh, mainly due to a slack safety standard. Staying in Asia, but in Pakistan now, where police have shot dead 4 gunmen who attacked the stock exchange in Karachi, killing 2 guards and a policeman and wounding 7 other people. The assailants launched a grenade attack at the main gates to the building and opened fire, but police say they failed to make it to the trading floor. Staff of the exchange took refuge in locked rooms, and many were evacuated as security forces put an end to the assault. The Director General of the Parliamentary Sindh Rangers Force, Omer Ahmadi Bukhari, said all the attackers have been killed within 8 minutes. The exchange is situated in a high security zone along with head offices of banks and other businesses. It has offices for hundreds of financial institutions and says up to 8,000 people work there on a normal day. But the numbers went down because of home working due to the coronavirus pandemic. Let's turn to a totally different story now. Iran has issued an arrest warrant for U.S. President Donald Trump and 35 other people over the killing of top General Qasem Soleimani, even going as far as asking Interpol for help. And let's remember, Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the Revolutionary Guards Quds Force, was killed in a drone strike on January 3rd this year. The U.S. president accuses Soleimani of masterminding attacks by Iranian allied militias on U.S. forces in the region. The warrants issued are for charges of murder and terrorist action. Interpol has been asked to issue a red notice for the U.S. president and the other individuals that it accuses of taking part in the killing of Soleimani. But Interpol says it would not consider requests of this nature, explaining that it is not in accordance with its rules and constitution, which states it is strictly forbidden for the organization to undertake any intervention or activities of a political, military, religious, or racial character. U.S. Special Representative for Iran, Brian Hook, has also called the move a political stunt that no one takes seriously and makes the Iranians look foolish. International Affairs analyst Calvin Dark is in Washington for us. Mr. Dark, great to see you, and thanks for joining us on the program. What do you make of this delayed response by Iran? I mean, this incident happened back in January, that's months ago, and now they take action.
Well, I think just from a practical standpoint, I think that the pandemic, the COVID-19 crisis is probably the main driver, just because, one, it wouldn't have broken into the news at all had they done this a couple of months ago. And I think that it would not have been regarded with any seriousness at all during a global pandemic. But now the second thing about the timing that I just want to share is I don't know if it's that the Iranians want President Trump to get reelected or not, but it surely does help him. Because think about it. For his base and those who support him, what better prize does he have to say, I now have an arrest warrant out against me from Iran? Because what that says to the people that support him is he must be doing something right if they want to arrest him. So this plays right into Donald Trump's hands and actually helps him in his reelection campaign.
Yeah, but the possibility of it ever happening is quite slim because it is rare for anyone to request the U.S. president being arrested, much less even charges brought against a sitting president. And they plan to prosecute him as soon as he steps down and if he loses the election this year. But let's talk about Interpol that has also backed out of this so-called request. How far do you think that Iran would go to make sure that President Donald Trump is arrested now that they have no allies in this?
Well, I think that this was a statement, propaganda as it's been called, because let's keep in mind that from a communication standpoint, here's what's important. We as in the world outside of Iran, have been seeing this as President Trump saying the world's worst terrorist. That's why he did what he did. Iran is saying, this was one of their military leaders, the same way that we would hold up one of our generals, our defense secretaries or whatnot. So by them issuing this order for his arrest, it at least puts out the message and communicates the message that this wasn't a terrorist that was killed, but this was one of our military officials. Also, I think that a lot of this is geared towards domestic consumption because with the pandemic and with the election in the United States, people are forgetting that happened back in January, and they have to make sure that their domestic audiences don't think that they are letting it slide. So from a communication standpoint, I see where it makes sense.
Yeah, it really doesn't make sense, though, from this part of the world. But a lot of people still are divided over the killing of Qasem Soleimani. Just his supporters, though, are still mourn him. But the better part of the people in the world, especially in the Middle East, are happy that he is gone. So could this be revenge for Iran, the revenge that they promised the U.S. back then, if by some chance President Donald Trump does have to face charges for what has happened?
Well, I think from a strategic point, it does allow them, for the rest of Donald Trump's term, whether it ends in November or continues or whatever happens after, this does give them that talking point of that they've issued this arrest warrant. It reminds people why they're focusing on Donald Trump and what he did. But I also want to just, putting things in perspective, this is not only the first time this has happened with a U.S. president, it's not even really the biggest. Remember when George W. Bush got out of office, there was a whole scandal of where he supposedly couldn't go on vacation because he was going to be arrested for crimes that other countries had alleged during the Iraq War. So this happens as a political statement, but I don't think practically, whether or not Donald Trump is real or not, that it will have any practical effect on him actually having to answer to these charges.
Indeed, Calvin. Thanks again for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you.
More than 500,000 people around the world have died from COVID-19. This comes as more than 10 million people have also contracted the virus. It also comes as some countries are now beginning to reconsider those lockdown measures that were eased, having seen a spike in cases. Health authorities are still concerned about the US, Europe, and Latin America.
In Brazil, just over 30,000 new COVID-19 cases have been recorded, taking the Latin American country's total to 1.34 million. Of those infected, 730,000 have recovered from the virus. Following a devastating 522 deaths in 24 hours, the country's death toll stands at 57,622. As cases continue rising in 30 U.S. states, the Texas governor speaks of a swift and very dangerous turn. In California, cases have topped 215,000. Governor Gavin Newsom has ordered bars, breweries, and pubs to be closed in 7 counties, including Los Angeles and in California. For the 3rd day in a row, Georgia has broken its record for new coronavirus cases in a single day, reporting 2,225 confirmed cases, topping 2,000 for the first time. Cases are surging in Leicester, resulting in pubs and restaurants in the city possibly staying closed for 2 more weeks. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's concerned about a rise in coronavirus cases in Leicester.
Coming out of the medical code.
In Bradford, Rochdale and Barnsley, there are also higher level of cases than the rest of the UK in recent weeks. Australia's second most populous state, Victoria, is considering reimposing social distancing restrictions after the country reported its biggest one-day rise in new coronavirus infections in more than 2 months. While many states and territories have yet to report their latest numbers, Victoria said it had detected 75 cases in the past 24 hours, enough to make it Australia's biggest daily outbreak since April the 11th. In Serbia, coronavirus restrictions are being tightened as more profile figures become infected. Several towns are now considered COVID-19 hotspots in the country. Currently, the restrictions lifted just weeks ago have been reintroduced in the country.
Mentioned the United States in that report and how those figures are scaring governors of different states. But the spread of coronavirus infections have taken a swift and very dangerous turn in the state of Texas. The governor, Greg Abbott, says the daily number of cases has gone from an average of about 2,000 to more than 5,000 in just a few weeks. Interestingly, he's not the only one concerned. Several southern and western states have recorded a surge in cases after lockdown restrictions were eased. The U.S. now has more than 2.5 million cases of COVID-19 and over 125,000 COVID-19 related deaths. That's more than any other country in the world. Channel Television's Maria Bird joins us now from Washington. Maria, great to see you as always. And are people just as concerned as the state governments about the rising number of cases of COVID-19 in their states, especially in these western and southern states?
You know, the residents are probably even more concerned in the state. Many residents have been stating for quite some time now that they were a bit concerned about the fast reopening of some states, as you mentioned, Texas. The real challenge that we're seeing is we're really seeing an uptick in the number of 20 to 30-year-olds that are contracting COVID-19. And this is really due to the bars. And as you mentioned, bars in Texas have now been closed again. Many of the social gatherings and not wearing masks, not the requirement to wear masks inside of facilities or even in very tightly knit social gathering environments. And so this has really put a dramatic impact. Arizona, California, where we're seeing large upticks in the LA County community. And so we are seeing about 12 states that are having to revisit their reopening and to put a halt on reopening, and many are pulling back on many of the openings that they had just a few days and few weeks ago.
Maria, just stay with us, okay? We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion. Plus, the winners of the BET Awards are in, and our very own Burna Boy, yeah, he won Best International Act, I believe. Do stay with us for the details. Welcome back to the program. Just before we went on the break, Maria Bird was speaking to us about the situation in the U.S., those spike in cases in Texas from 2,000 to about more than 5,000 in just a few weeks. And the U.S. still recording over 125,000 deaths. Maria, what about the restrictions that are being reimposed? What do they entail? And what are the experts saying still about reopening the American economy?
Well, the restrictions, many states do not have a wear mask restriction when you enter inside a store. And so many states are trying to move toward that, not only suggesting it, but requiring that for some states. We have 12 states that are actually looking at kind of going back to a phase one or looking at potentially closing down, as I mentioned, bars, restaurants, areas where people could be contracting the actual infection due to being in close quarters and not having the appropriate mask or social distancing guidelines. So that will probably be in place. We're also seeing where they will reduce the number of individuals that can be within a certain space. So for example, if you're out at a park environment and you're having a picnic, they might reduce it from 50 people to 10 people to reduce the number of individuals that are in close contact with one another. And so those are some of the restrictions that are being put back in place. Other states, obviously, that have seen great success. If you look at New York, which is a hotbed initially, they have seen the cases go down drastically. They'll be halting some of their reopening phases just to ensure that they don't end up in a place as California.
Indeed, Maria Bird, thanks again for joining us, and do stay safe out there.
Thank you for having me.
Scientists in South Africa are working to close the gap on test kits used for COVID-19. And one local microbiology research firm has taken up the responsibility of making this happen.
A shortage of coronavirus test kits has undermined South Africa's early response to the crisis, and a local research firm is stepping up to try to fill the gap. Cape Biotechnologies, which sprung up from the Center for Scientific Industrial Research Lab in 2018, plans to roll out up to 5,000 test kits per day from the end of July, with support from the South African government. The Chief Executive Officer of the company, Mr. Daniel Indima, says the kits would produce results within 2 hours, down from a 4 to 5 hour time frame taken by currently available kits, which are imported.
When we realized that the pandemic would be coming to South Africa, we then looked into our portfolio and we decided to look at how we can respond to the crisis for South African market, because we knew that South Africa and the entire continent basically relies heavily on imports, and we knew that because of the pandemic, our country will struggle to get the test kits. So we said to ourselves that we need to stop doing what we were doing and just work on COVID-19 testing project.
According to the Health Ministry, in May, there was a backlog of more than 96,000 unprocessed specimens awaiting coronavirus tests in South Africa. At 5,000 test kits per day, Cape Bio could meet over a tenth of South Africa's current daily testing rate approximately.
We develop these kits locally using our local biological resources from the biodiversity hotspots. So in the sense that, for the first time, the world has access to, products and kits that are sourced from African biological resources.
The World Health Organization has said shortages of test kits was a challenge in Africa. Cape Bio, with its team of 11, mostly scientists, will be supplying the kits to the government, while already seeing demand pouring in from other companies globally.
Today is day 5 of Russia's nationwide vote on constitutional changes, and voter turnout was 37.2%, according to the Russian Central Election Commission. The Russian state opinion pollster Vitsyom said today that the exit polls showed that 76% of Russians had so far voted to support reforms that could allow President Vladimir Putin to extend his rule until 2036. The nationwide vote on constitutional reforms began June 25th and is being held over 7 days as a precaution against the coronavirus pandemic. If approved, the changes would allow Putin to run twice for president again after his current term expires in 2024. Also said 76% of those who had voted so far had backed the reforms, and that 23.6% of people who agreed to be polled after voting said they had voted against it. Mexico City's Attorney General's office says a total of 19 suspects have been arrested in connection with the assassination attempt on the capital's police chief on Friday. On Sunday, video footage released by authorities showed the arrested suspects being transferred to an undisclosed location. Ulysses Lara Lopez, the officer's spokesperson, said investigations were at an advanced stage And of the 13 vehicles, different caliber weapons such as grenade launcher, 34 long weapons, 8 short weapons, and 7 fragmentation grenades had been seized. Mexico City's police chief Omar Garcia Harfuch suffered 3 bullet wounds, and 2 of his bodyguards were killed in the dramatic assassination attempt early Friday, which he quickly blamed on one of Mexico's most powerful drug gangs, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG for short.